And now, let's bring out our special guest. Hello? Hello? Is this thing on?
Hey everybody, it's Todd Kazinka. Another issue of Youth and Fitness, our podcasts that we have all the time. And this week we have a very special guest from the Virginia area, Washington, D.C., Dr. Kwame Brown. Kwame, welcome.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here, Todd.
Kwame is a doctor who has a background in neuroscience, but also has been a practitioner with working with children, obese children, sedentary children, and also he has worked with athletes. And today we're going to talk a little bit about youth obesity, youth sports, kind of the whole continuum, lack of play, lack of access to play, and the importance of play. So Kwame, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and let the viewers know, how you came to get interested in working with children.
Oh, well, thank you. My background is pretty eclectic, so I'll try to get through it as briefly as I can. Usually that's a problem for me, but I started an intensive study of movement, the acquisition of movement skill and movement development about 20 years ago at age 17. Mm-hmm. That'll tell everybody if you can do math. I'm 7 now. So I started as a kid that didn't move well. I wanted to get strong. Mm-hmm. So I started doing all the things you do at 17 and 18, martial arts, weightlifting, and it led me. I've always been an inquisitive person, so it led me down a path where I was trying to study and master anything I could get my hands on. I became a competitive tennis player. I came from a basketball neighborhood, so I tried to master all the skills there. Ended up doing pretty well playing against the guys on Georgetown's team while I was there in grad school. And then it led me to study movement science, more specifically the development of the nervous system and how that produces the ability to move, and also how that interacts with injury during development. And that's what I did my dissertation on in graduate school. Mm-hmm. And I went on to, I've been studying yoga and Pilates as well for many years, probably 500 contact hours or so in those disciplines, professional contact hours. And I also am heavily involved in promoting and shaping play-based fitness with a group called Exuberant Animal and organizations like Centered Being. So I have basically run the continuum as a practitioner and as a scientist, looking from the molecular level all the way up to the whole human animal.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And what about, tell me a little bit about the IYCA, and I know your involvement with them, because I met you originally through the IYCA, which is the International Youth Conditioning Association. Tell me how you got involved with Brian Grasso and that group.
Well, I was part of the founding board of directors of the IYCA, thanks to a phone call Brian and I had back in early 2003, after I got really angry with someone on a on a discussion forum. The things they were talking about doing with children I knew were damaging. And at this age and stage of the game, my strategy would be far different. I would seek to bring that person in and teach them and trade ideas with them. Instead, at 20-something, I decided to blast them, and that caught some people's attention. And so Brian and I had a great conversation. We talked for an hour and a half the first time we ever talked, and it was a professional marriage made in heaven, and it developed into a friendship and a great collaboration. I'm mainly involved with the IYCA now. I created, Brian and I created the materials together for the Level 1 Youth Fitness Certification. I also edited and wrote 2 chapters in the book for the Level 2 certification and created testing materials for them as well. I still work with the IYCA, but mainly as teacher and advisor. I'm now developing my own concept called Move Theory, which is you can go to www.movetheory.com. I don't know if I said too many W's there. I usually do that.
We'll put the link up on the video when I upload it to YouTube. I'll put the Move Theory link on there as well.
Cool, I appreciate it. But I'm grateful always for the beginnings with the IYCA, because that helped. I knew I wanted to work with children. I knew that what was going on in youth sports was wrong. but by and large, not all of it. Uh, but that gave me a purpose and an entity to help develop toward that end.
Hmm. Now, let's talk a little bit about the youth sports issue. I know that that's one of the hot buttons for me since I have a 7-year-old, and since I've coached kids probably for about 25 years. And, you know, you're always learning as a coach. You're always learning new things and better ways of doing things. And that's one of the things that struck me with the IYCA is that breakdown of age groups, in the whole element of guided discovery with 6 to 9 year olds, which I found was fantastic. And I know a lot of times coaches, and I saw it this year with my son's team, coaches think that they can train little 6 to 9 year olds like little adults, which is a big problem, I think, all across the board in youth sports, and they just don't learn that way. Can you talk a little bit about that guided discovery for the 6 to 9 year olds, and how youth sports could benefit from maybe adopting some of these methodologies?
Yeah, I think we make some faulty assumptions about not only how children learn, but how humans learn. We learn through exploration. We learn best, I will say, through exploration.
Hmm.
Certainly,
Hmm.
people and children can actually learn some things and on a superficial level from being told. But we don't learn on the deep level. You know, if you're looking, I see a lot of parents that are they think their child's talented, and I think in most cases they're correct on some level. So they're looking for their child to have that Kobe Bryant or Roger Federer-esque uh, ability.
Hmm.
But the fact is that for them did not come from being drilled and drilled. It came from playful exploration. In fact, if you talk to those guys about their history, they both played soccer competitively during their childhood. Uh, Kobe Bryant's into all kinds of things. He boxes. He does all kinds of different movements when he trains. It's certainly not about just drilling basketball, though that's part of it. Roger Federer practices yoga. He played soccer competitively until he was 12. So it's about them having, and it was also about play. It was about just playing in your neighborhood. I have a buddy, Chris Draft, who played 13 seasons in the NFL, and he has a book called Want to Play Catch. He talks about he was in the NFL because he played, not
Hmm.
because he was drilled.
Hmm.
We sat together on a panel for the National Urban League Centennial here in DC this summer, or last summer, and he talked extensively about that. So these are professional athletes that say these things, not just me.
Hmm.
But we learn through experiencing something through several different situations from different angles with regard to movement on different terrain. The more I run on different surfaces and in different situations and have to change direction for different reasons, most of which should be because I enjoy changing direction because there's a ball over there.
Hmm.
Those are the things that truly teach us, and coaches are there to guide, to step in. If you look at uh, the work that Penny Wilson does over in the UK with play workers, they're all about stepping in and providing some guidance and then becoming invisible again.
Hmm.
And it's been a very successful model for many, many years. That's sort of the model I've always gone with coaching kids, asking them questions. Okay, how do you think you could have avoided falling on your butt when you changed direction?
Hmm.
What part of your body was too far forward? So I asked them a lot of questions, and for them to arrive at their own answers, not for me to tell them the answer. It's like the old proverb: if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, they eat for a lifetime. And so I would like to see youth sports make a paradigm shift towards teaching kids how to fish.
Hmm. I think that's a good point, and I know that um, a big part of what I like to use, and I know that you guys advocate this as well, is skill-based games. I mean, Exuberant Animal, the organization is a good example as well. As it's about play, but you know, there's some games involved there as well. And with children, you can come up. You're only limited by your imagination. And I've never really coached ice hockey, but it's not hard to come up with some games on the ice for kids that are 6 to 9 years old. To, you know, tag games. Tag is a great agility developer, as you know, but I know that when I'm out there on the ice or I'm on a basketball court with kids, kids just want to play. And if you can show them and teach them elements of the game, through a skill-based game, rather than through a drill where they're just repetitively doing something and they don't even know why they're doing it, then I find that's way, way more beneficial. And it's exactly what you're talking about there. Now,
And I'm
yeah, go ahead.
glad. I just want to step in there real quick. I'm glad you mentioned Exuberant Animal because that's a group I've been involved with for about 3 years. I've been involved since the ground floor with that group as well. And Frank Forencich, who is who founded Exuberant Animal and is one of the greatest authors I've ever read, and also happens to be like an older brother to me. He's not going to like the older part. And I'm actually headed out there next week to help Frank develop a project. I'll be in Seattle all next week to work with that. So I've been very grateful for what he's put out there into the ether as well, and Stuart Brown, who's a mutual friend of ours who founded the National Institute for Play as well. But I think also we misunderstand what play is. I was participating in a discussion with a couple of people on Facebook, as you know, Todd, I want to do often.
No,
I'm nothing if not fiery.
that's good.
So someone said something that really disturbed me. They said, well, kids will have plenty of time to play when they grow up and get a job later. What people don't realize is that play is not frivolous.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we look at play, especially in the United States. It's something frivolous to do when you have nothing else to do. If I may quote the famous psychiatrist K. Redfield Jameson, play is the work of childhood. It is, in fact, necessary. And it's not necessary because I'm saying that because I'm an advocate, because I have a belief system. It's necessary because the data has told me so.
Mm-hmm. And you've done the research as a neuroscience scientist. You've pored over it.
I've done very little of it. I've been informed by research from scientists and researchers that have a much greater body of work in that area than I do.
Mm-hmm.
But what my job is with move theory, and what move theory is all about, is the synthesis of this knowledge and making it and packaging it in ways that people can understand. So I'm grateful for that role.
I remember when I was in university taking cultural aspects of human movement course in kinesiology, and one of our projects was to go and observe children playing in a wherever, a playground, wherever children play, and that's always remained with me. I've always remembered how all about that, and when I think about now watching kids play, I think people that are listening to this should just go and watch kids play. And if you have children, it's easy because the kids are always playing. But if you don't, go find some kids playing. It's fascinating because if left to themselves, they'll figure things out. If they have a problem, they work it out usually. If in terms of behavior or sharing or something like that. But then they come up with the most creative games, and it's so for me, it's so pleasurable just to see the joy on their face when they play, whether it's physical movement play or just playing with toys or using their minds, playing with little cars, whatever. Now, when you talk about as an advocate for play with Exuberant Animal and all the other activities, when you are instructing, let's say you're instructing coaches about play, what are some of the key points that you would have coaches or facilitators of play focus on?
Well, when I am training coaches and teachers, especially with a move theory led event, sometimes I'm tied to other people's constraints and their style when I give a talk for someone else. But when it's a move theory event, the first thing I do is get coaches playing so they can feel the value instead of just listening to the evidence. And that's one part of the training. But feeling the value of play and feeling what it gives you, feeling how much more you understand a lunge when you're involved in a playful game that involves lunging. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing that I think is important, is to, instead of trying to bring children into our world, okay, we'll have a Zumba class for kids, a yoga class for kids, a Pilates class for kids, weightlifting class for kids. Why don't we try more to step into their world? Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing that I try to make sure coaches understand, that when you're playing, you're in the world of the child. And as an aside, for adults, I've done adult play classes. I've done this, and it's amazing how much it lifts an adult spirits to step into the world of the child once in a while. I think that we misunderstand. We think that we have become something different when we've become an adult. When in reality, all we've done, if you know how the brain develops and works, all we've done is build layers of higher level processing on what we already had. So the child in you, people talk about your inner child, that's a
Mm-hmm.
real mechanistic reality.
Mm-hmm.
The inner child, the child within you, is still present. We pack all these layers onto it. So I am very interested in adults being able to peel back those layers for themselves. For example, I'm completely okay with looking like a complete fool in front of a group of children because I
But
leave my ego at the door,
but that's a
which I
label that you put on it because the children don't think you look like a fool.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the teenagers do
The teenagers
because
will, yeah.
they've started to build
Yeah.
some adult levels
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
on adult layers on top of their bliss, as my friend Susie Celentano would say. Uh, but yeah, the children just know that you're being silly with them, and they love it.
Now, do you think that adults, you meant, I can see that adults kind of forget how to be a kid, and that's one thing that I always try to do when I'm coaching kids is be a kid, like you're talking about. Do you think that a lot of times adults, these layers you're talking about, they kind of forget what it's like to play like a child again? I mean, because society has placed all these restrictions on them, or the layers that they've placed upon themselves have caused them to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to play, I'm an adult. And then, like you said, when you get them playing, they enjoy it. What do you think is the cause of it, or how can we start reversing this other than through things like Exuberant Animal and all these other organizations?
Well, I think and this may be shocking to some people for me to hear me say this, but I think the only reason that I would be self-conscious about play, or I would feel that it wasn't something I would be supposed to be engaging in, is ego.
Ego, okay.
I want to be seen like this. I want to be seen as a professional. I've talked to high-ranking officials in the physical education world, and one of their concerns is that their members, or the people that they're responsible for, the professionals they're responsible for, are seen as professionals. And I
Mm-hmm.
have always tried to say that PE teachers should, instead of trying to conform to what people's idea is of corporate professionalism, should be making the case for play, making the case for actually departing from that in their profession, and making the case that that's a very serious thing,
Mm-hmm.
that silliness is a very serious thing.
I agree with you, but it sounds funny, and I
It does
yeah,
sound
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
It sounds counterintuitive.
Yes.
And some things in life are counterintuitive because we're not really talking about intuition, are we? We're talking they're more counter dogma.
Mm-hmm.
It's very intuitive that silliness is important because we have so many comedies on TV.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Yeah. Maybe because people are so serious in their daily life. They think that the comedy, the laughter is outside of them, and they have to. I think that's kind of what happens a lot of times is we just forget. We forget how much fun life can be. The pressures of life people put upon themselves with money and all these other things and raising a family, and they just start taking everything so seriously, life, themselves, and they forget to have fun like children.
Right.
So it's I mean that's one possibility. Now I want to talk a little bit. It's still related to your move theory website, movetheory.com, and tell me a little bit about how you got started with that and the kind of the mission statement. I know you do some speaking and you have some writing. You're going to be moving your blog there. Tell me a little bit about that because I think it looks like a fantastic idea and a fantastic program that you're starting.
Well, I can only hope that it's fantastic, but the one thing I can say without being haughty or egotistical is that it's interesting because it's interesting to me how it developed.
Hmm.
Well, move theory developed really from two streams of consciousness. One was Bruce Lee. As a martial artist, I became enamored with Bruce Lee's philosophies, and people know him from his movies and the wah. But what people don't realize is that he was a philosophy student. That's part of what he came to the States for. Um, and he created a set of concepts. Now they've unfortunately become schools and a system now, which he never intended, but a set of concepts called Jeet Kune Do. And the Jeet Kune Do symbol, not a lot of people know this, is tattooed on my right shoulder. His philosophy was adapted from an ancient Taoist saying, meaning, loosely translated, use no way as the way. And now there are various people throughout our history who have believed this. Coltrane, John Coltrane, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Lady Gaga. These people believe that convention only exists if you allow it to. So I started to think about his philosophies and using no way as the way and adapting to what the world needed us to be at the moment. And I knew intuitively early on, I didn't know this from an evidentiary or an evidence-based perspective until much later, but I knew very early in my early 20s that play somehow fit into that. So I was listening to some music on my way home, and there was a group called in the 90s called Groove Theory. Which sported a lead singer by the name of Mel LaRue. She went to high school with Boys to Men, and she's a very sort of ethereal, jazz-tinged singer. So she's about improvisation in her singing. And I was thinking about these concepts from Bruce Lee, and this is how my mind works, by the way. You're getting a little insight into my very cluttered brain. And I'm actually a balance of left brain and right brain. I said to somebody this weekend that my brain is full of butterflies holding calculators. But I was thinking about Bruce Lee's philosophies, and I was listening to Mel LaRue sing, and I said, well, I think I need to create move theory. And that's how this happened. Move theory is about the fact that too many people retreat into these theoretical concepts that sound very nice on paper and in our heads, and they never move anywhere towards action. And I think there's another segment of our society that's too rooted in action without thought. So move theory is meant for the sake of our children to marry the two. We need to have action, real action that's informed by well thought out theory. And that's what my goal is to do, is to bring the science to practical application in the tradition of someone like Carl Sagan, who my father pushed on me when I was little, and I didn't appreciate it at the time. But I now fashion myself in his model, bringing what we know about science. See, a lot of people like to discount research as if it's worthless because maybe they don't understand it, or also, there have been researchers that have been incredibly irresponsible, like the people who created Your Baby Can Read and Baby Einstein. I mean, these things are ridiculous. But the fact is, we have to marry the two to create the world that we need to leave for children.
So where do you see that going with move theory? Is the main goal to get people moving, kids moving, playing? Is that the main foundation of it all?
Yeah, but I use several different avenues for that. So I help organizations like International Youth Conditioning Association that from 2003 to about 2006 I was helping plan the direction of IYCA, and groups like Exuberant Animal, groups like Centered Being, that's based here in Northern Virginia, that's all about bringing mind, body, spirit practice to children, and many other groups, but I concentrate on the children's side. And other groups, some of which I can't mention because of non-disclosure agreements.
Okay.
But so that's one part of it. The other part is my direct work with kids and families. I've trained so many sets of siblings and so many sets of parents and kids at this point. I can't count anymore. And then the final part is informing government of what they can do to open up and remove barriers to play, because children play naturally. We put the barriers in front of that play. So what I'm trying to do is inform the whole continuum, trying to make sure that people know the reasons we should provide for play for children, what that play should look like, what our role in that play should look like, and then how we can change our society from how we plan curricula to how we build our cities and our neighborhoods to remove these barriers for kids.
Now, relating to this, we mentioned earlier about youth obesity, childhood obesity, and then obviously, I mean, it goes into adulthood where there's a lot of overweight and obese adults. Let's start talking a little bit about that, about the obesity problem. I think we need to attack it as their children. I mean, that's where it's starting. And I mean, but it's the parents that are allowing the kids, or the parents are definitely involved with the inactivity of their children and what they feed them and everything. It's a huge topic. Give me your thoughts on this whole youth obesity challenge that we have.
Well, I'll say a couple things about that. The first thing is I wrote a blog post on the Move Theory blog a while back that was called "Whose Fault Is It Anyway?" And I basically formed a grand jury and indicted every segment of society and ascribed specific contributions that we had all made to creating this problem. So there's not a single person in society that hasn't been, or a single segment of
Hmm.
society, I should say, that hasn't been complicit in creating this in some way. So we can't say parents, we can't say teachers, we can't say corporations, we can't say government,
Hmm.
we certainly can't say children without talking about all of us. So that's the one thing. It's the village that has created this, and to wit, it's the village that has to solve it. I will also say that the obesity problem is poorly named.
Hmm.
The obesity problem is named for the symptom.
Right,
We need to rename it for the root cause.
right. And I know, I
So I
remember
like to call it the love problem.
love problem. Okay.
I do what I love. I'm a human being. Or more to the point, I have the desire to do what I love. Some of us accept jobs because we need to make money, but really we want to do what we love. And I have the luxury of two things of not being rich, but also not being rich, but also being able to do exactly what I love. I'm not a slave to cash. I need to make enough to make my bills and to pay for my food, but I'm not a slave to a BMW or anything like that. So I see the value in being able to do what we love and how that motivates. We talk about motivating kids as if that's something. Hey, Johnny, you got to get up and move, buddy.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah,
you're going to get fat and die.
yeah. I know.
That's not
Yeah.
motivation. What we need to be talking about is intrinsic motivation.
Hmm.
And playfulness is the best creator of intrinsic motivation that I've ever seen, both in children and adults. You get someone playing with an idea. Well, how do you think we got Google? How do you think we got the iPad, the iPod? Those things derived from playfulness.
How did we get Google Motion?
Yeah. Todd is, for those, the benefit of those listening to the interview, Todd is ribbing me a little bit about me falling for Google's April Fool's joke, and I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Not only did I get really excited about the Google Motion idea, I tweeted it out all over the place as if it was the greatest invention this century. So, I was grateful for the laugh and the joke.
But you know what's funny is we are laughing, and I love to laugh. Is that even though it was an April Fool's joke, that I mean, just the fact that someone came up with the idea, it could be your reality in the future for sure. Like, people would have laughed at one point that you could have looked at someone when you were talking to them on the phone, right? I mean, they could have laughed that there would ever have been such a thing as a television or whatever, like these far out ideas. I mean, it is funny that you fell for it, and I'm all for laughing at you for that, but it could be a reality for sure. I mean, maybe they're working on it. But
They,
something,
they
yeah.
They may be, and they may be doing the sneaky April Fool's joke to sort of plant the seed. And the comedian Eddie Griffin years ago did a routine about Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone, and his joke was that Graham stood for gram of cocaine, because how else are you going to come up with the idea? I want to talk to somebody who ain't here.
Yeah, exactly.
So truly, I mean, a sense of play creates innovation. It builds resilience. It builds problem-solving ability. There was an experiment done a while back, and Todd, I love talking about this research.
Sure.
They took two groups of kids. These were kids below I think they were between 3 and 5, and there was this tool that they were to put together. It was basically like a raking tool they could use to get a toy that was in this box, and they were to build the tool and reach the tool into the box to get the toy. And one group of children was taught how to do it by a teacher. And he said, you do it like this, and you put it this piece with this piece with this piece, and here's how you do it. Another group of kids was told to just play with the object, the pieces, until they figured out how to build it. Now, a significant portion of both groups learned how to make the tool. But that's not the important part of the experiment. The important part of the experiment is what happened with the kids who failed to make the tool in each group. Those who were taught the first time they failed, they quit. Those who were given the task to just play with it kept trying and trying until they finally got it, until I believe all the children in that group eventually got the ability to make the tool. But those who were told how to do it, quit. And that's exactly what I see happen in sports and fitness. Kids who are told, quit. The kids who find some sort of intrinsic motivation, continue.
Interesting. There's an interesting article that someone shared on Facebook with one of my friends on Facebook that relates exactly to that yesterday, and it's from the New York Magazine, and I'll share that link. It's the power and peril, it says in parentheses, of praising your kids. And I haven't read the whole article. It's a 5-page article. If you go on my Facebook page, Kwame, you'll be able to find it. It's the inverse power of praise, and it talks about the same thing. It's sort of like if you, if you're telling kids how to do something, or if you constantly tell a kid he's smart, and if there's something that they can do easily, then they'll do it. But if they fail that first time, they'll stop trying. Because exactly what you're talking about. It's very interesting that you mentioned that experiment. I will share that with you and with the listeners as well. Pretty cool.
Well, yeah, that they're talking about the work of my fellow neuroscientist Carol Dweck and Daniel Willingham from I forget where Dr. Dweck is from, but Daniel Willingham's at UVA, right?
Columbia. She's now at Stanford.
She's now at Columbia. Okay,
yeah,
so
she's now at Stanford, but her team, they were at Columbia. Yeah, interesting.
Yep, I remember her from being at Columbia. And see, what's funny is I always laugh, and it's not a judgment laugh. It's just a funny laugh that the things that I was studying as a first-year graduate student in 1996 are just coming out in news articles now, because it takes so long for the science to get out there. Sometimes it comes out too quick, especially in the case of disease care. People put stuff out there in the media way too quick before it's really proven. But the more mechanistic things take years. They take sometimes decades to get to the public. So I remember reading that work early on, and I knew this as a student and I remembered it as a child. I was one of those kids. My parents and teachers praised me because my test scores were through the roof. And I was the first time I failed something, I was distraught. First time I tried and failed something, I was distraught, and I had no compass, no idea how to get through it. It just took me out, Todd. So, I definitely saw the pitfall for that. You look at girls who are told they're pretty all the time. They're handcuffed to it. And if I'm going to handcuff a child to something, I'd rather handcuff them to play or effort than handcuffing them to their looks or their intelligence, things that they have no control over.
Right.
I would rather handcuff them to a steering wheel than handcuff them to a bumper.
No, for sure. Now, what I when I hear this, it makes me think about the physical education classes that of the past, and maybe that still goes on today, where you have kids that are good athletes. They're the jocks of the school that really like phys ed, and they just like, they're good at sports, so it comes easy to them, and they're praised all the time what good athletes they are. And then you've got those kids that really struggle with maybe running and doing the traditional physical education activities where they get picked last for and then that affects their self-esteem. And it's kind of this a similar thing where you have someone that's told all the time that they're good, so hey, they're doing well. But what about those kids, Kwame? Like, I'm thinking about how to modify maybe physical education, where instead of doing sports, we're playing more in physical education. Is there a movement towards, you've kind of mentioned it a little bit, but is there a movement towards getting the whole population doing more fun things in physical education? Because that's what it should be about, physical education.
Well, there are different movements within physical education world. I want to be quite honest about that. I've known PE teachers that really have a sense of play in their physical education classes, and it's really about. I know Megan Mulcahy at Claremont Elementary here in Northern Virginia. She has one of my favorite games that I've ever seen. It's called Doom Dome, where she fits these hula hoops together,
Yeah.
and each little team or couple has to protect their doom dome, and the other side is trying to throw balls at to break it apart while they're trying to throw balls, and it's this whole strategy problem solving game. And the heart rates go up, and there's all kinds of movement. You have to squat to pick up the ball, you have to throw, you have to run. So I've seen that, and I've also seen the model where you have a very insecure profession, and it's not necessarily some of the fault rests with the profession, because for a long time we've had either Gestapo PE teachers or PE teachers that were sedentary and obese themselves.
Yep.
um, so we've had that, and then that had this circular relationship where people started to bash physical education. And so then you have people in the field that are very earnest in what they do, but they feel the need to prove their worth as professionals. So now we have to have instructional units. So it's this circular, this vicious cycle that's going on in PE. So there's definitely movements among the younger generation of PE teachers to get more towards play, and then some come from fitness and sports backgrounds, so they're very much about the didactic learning of how to play a sport and the effort side. And then some are about play, and then some others are about units of instruction. So right now, to me, it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
And I want to be very honest about that. And I say honest because I've never been a classroom PE teacher, but I come from that world. I used to do in-services
Hmm.
for PE teachers for Fairfax County. So these are my friends.
Hmm.
And these are people I've, I say again, I've known tremendous physical education teachers, people that should be given medals, and some who have. Uh, so I think it's a mixed bag, just like it is with any profession, but we've got to figure it out.
Hmm. Yeah, I know it's a tough one. I know that again, you're talking about people perceiving play as frivolous, where it shouldn't be that way. It actually can get your heart rate up, and it's more than just the physical benefit. It's the mental. It's all the other benefits. But I know that in schools in Canada, at least where I live, and I'm sure it's the same across many of the United States as well, many of the states. My son is 7 years old in grade two. He gets 3 days a week of phys ed, only because his teacher and her sister, who's also a teacher in the school, put the classes together 1 day a week to get a third class. Most of the other classes, this is elementary school, primary school, they only get 2 days a week. And a lot of them, there's no phys ed specialists at the school. The teachers kind of just go in and do their thing, whatever. And I know that there was many elementary schools in the past didn't have phys ed specialists. So to me, when I see that, and I start seeing all these obese kids in school in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, it really worries me. And it's again, like you said, it's not one person's fault. It's a larger problem that has to be solved. But in terms of just the physical education component, I mean, 2 days a week's not going to do it. I mean, I'm sure when you were a kid, you were getting phys ed 5 days a week.
Right. and but even in my generation, when we got to high school, it was an elective.
Yeah, elective. Yeah.
I took it. Now in college, in my college, it was required, but it was a joke. So we need to we. It's been a long time uh, since we've truly had a physical culture, and I don't know if we ever had a physical culture that was inclusive of everyone. So instead of going back and instead of looking at yesteryear with nostalgia, we need to create something new that's informed by the uh, wherewithal and the verve that we had for it in previous generations, and what we know about play now that we weren't necessarily aware of in the global consciousness in
Mm-hmm.
previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
So it used to be about, yeah, every kid was active, but they were browbeaten. And in fact, every time we've had a surge in importance of physical education in this United States, it has been militarily driven. After World War One, kids were
Interesting.
malnourished, so they started talking about nutrition and physical education. Then we had another lapse. Then after at World War Two, the soldiers were woefully out of shape. So now we have another push. Eisenhower started the President's Council. Now the Joint Chiefs are now again starting to look at physical activity. And my fear is that I don't want it to be militarily driven this time. It needs to be societally driven. It needs to be grassroots driven.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the great things that I see about the IYCA is that you're training professionals and parents, I mean, to learn and to become youth fitness specialists. And the more people that become aware of this and trained and specialize with youth fitness and understanding childhood development, the better we'll be. I know that you have a lot of friends in that area. If you look on your wall of your Move Theory and on your personal page on Facebook, I mean, there's tons of people. I know Dave Gleason, who's got an Athletic Revolution franchise back east. David Kittner, our friend, Melissa, is it Gilbert? Melissa, somebody?
Melissa Lambert.
Lambert,
Yeah.
not Melissa Gilbert, the Little House in the Prairie. No, not her. But I mean, these people are at the forefront, and there's many more like yourself and Brian Grasso, et cetera, that are trying to make a difference with children, and because children are so important, and I see it, and that's why I got my youth and fitness started, and that's why I'm talking to you now, is to get the information out there to people, and so it's so valuable. Are there any other things that you think that we could do to push this forward and make people more aware?
Yes, I'd like for everybody listening to this to, and I'm borrowing from a colleague here, to remember, borrowing from my colleague Ray Pica, actually, who's tremendous in the field of early childhood development and play. Remember the most fun that you had playing as a kid. Usually was outside, and it was with your friends or it was with your parents. So I want to sort of leave everyone with that thought. If we connect with that thought more as we consider what to do when we build our communities, when we program our facilities, when we complain about children playing in the street, if we connect back to that thought, I think we'll make our decisions a lot differently.
Hmm. I think that's a great point. I know that. I mean, a lot of times parents think just putting their kids in sports is enough to keep them fit, but it's more than just the fitness. It's the whole well-rounded development that you're talking about, and in the smaller communities, I see a lot of kids playing, but in the big cities, like they're people are afraid a lot of times of letting their kids go out and play, but these playgrounds that have great, like we have a new playground in a few years old in our small town, and there's hardly anyone ever using it, unfortunately. But we've got to. I agree with you. We've got to get those people out there playing, getting parents understanding the importance of it, because a lot of times parents are so tired they come home and they're beat from work, and then they let their kids get on that video game and watch TV, and they don't spend that time playing. And I don't know if you saw last week, I posted the pictures of me playing in the garage,
I did. I love that.
garage
Those
hockey
pictures.
with my son, and like again we played last night. He just loves, Daddy, can we play in the garage? Can we play hockey? And it means so much to them, and I do it because I love it. It's fun, and I know it's important for him. So Kwame, just want to finish off here with, and again, I thank you so much for your time. I want to finish off. You kind of left us there with a really good point, but I just want you to just give me a summary or any closing thoughts on this important topic.
All right. Well, the first and foremost, we need to transform our concept of the term is used in the field often moderate to vigorous physical activity, which is very sterile and clinical. And I'm trying to promote the term active play because that I know what that means right away. I know that I'm supposed to be moving my body, and it's supposed to be fun. And I wrote an article yesterday on what active play means. If everyone goes to the Move Theory blog, you can see that. It's also at movetheory.com under latest thoughts. I'm also going to be launching a program called Function. It's going to be launching in the fall. And my goal is to get this program after school programs at rec centers all around the United States. It has been the source of training for the fitness part of the main summer camp in Fairfax County for several years now, and now it's going live and it's going national. So
awesome.
What I've done with that program is train both parents, counselors, teachers on how to use function coachable moments to foster children's play within games that are designed to help children do the basic movements that a body needs to be able to do to have fun playing: squatting, lunging, rotating, running, jumping, climbing, throwing, catching, those things, hitting, those things that children need to be able to do to have it's called, the tagline is building blocks for a lifetime of physical play. So there you go.
Awesome. So everybody, Dr. Kwame Brown, Move Theory, Child Development Specialist, Thought Leader, and Change Agent. That's the tagline on the blog, and I agree totally with those descriptors. So Kwame, thanks very much for your time. We're going to get this up on YouTube. We're going to try to spread it far and wide. You can use it however you want, and I wish you all the best, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. We'll be here next time. Keep the emails coming in and be sure to subscribe.